Coming up on this episode of Courage Over Comfort with your hosts, Matt Logan and Beth Blanchard.
The great thing about the age we live in is
we
live in an
absolutely.
age of acceptance.
Yes, absolutely.
And stuttering still kind of not accepted very much because
they
it's
don't know
something.
enough.
Right.
Yeah.
Which is why we've got to get the word out there.
Absolutely.
Gosh, it's just such a neat message that has so much power over so many aspects of our lives, that courage over comfort thing.
Thank you.
I would actually like to thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of myself and hopefully get some words out to those who stutter, that it's not about not stuttering, it's about communicating.
Yeah.
That was a great conversation.
It was a wonderful conversation. I'm so glad to have met someone and really move through a conversation that focuses on communication.
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
our whole point, right?
Absolutely, yes.
I think his perception that he shared with us is really powerful and something that we can just think about in all the interactions that we have.
Absolutely.
And definitely changes what I'm thinking about moving forward.
I think that it's so important. People are probably going to, once we announce shortly like what the podcast is essentially about, it's going to sound like it's specifically about that issue, right?
Yeah.
But like you mentioned, it's communication.
Yes.
And you can learn so much from this gentleman. He wrote this wonderful book that we're going to talk about how to get to at the end. But let's introduce him. Go for it.
Yes, it's Jeffrey Glessing, like blessing, and the conversation's amazing. You'll love it.
Welcome, Jeffrey.
We are so glad to have you here. Thanks for coming out here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. You have a very interesting story, and we've been talking off camera. I think I mentioned that we might cut some of those clips in the podcast here, some good nuggets, right?
Yes.
So
We got started early.
yeah.
Okay.
But I reached out to you because someone had talked about what you do. Tell us about that.
Well, I'm a speech-language pathologist in the Rochester area, and have been here in Rochester since 2004. I'm also a person who stutters and have a history of that. That's how I became a speech pathologist.
That's awesome. That couldn't have been very easy either, right? I mean, when you were growing up having those stuttering problems, I mean, what was in your mind?
Stuttering's really interesting because on the outside you look, quote, normal, whatever that means. But then
No one's ever accused me of looking normal or being normal, so
then when you open your mouth, people are, kind of drawn back, like, why do you do that?
okay.
So
As
that,
if it's a choice.
well, right, because most people, there's the misconception that it's 100% anxiety. And that anybody
interesting.
can turn into a person who stutters. And it's like, no, that's not how this works.
That's
Wow.
interesting.
I mean, the research is showing your brain processes language difference. It's in more across the two hemispheres.
That is cool to hear a different perspective, because I actually would not have tied the two together until you said that. But I do think that
Does
that's
make sense.
very, could be a very common perception of that you're nervous.
Right,
or
you're just nervous, you're just anxious, you just
tripping
need to-
over words is one thing, but actually processing the language in your head differently, and what those roadblocks might look like is a totally different deal.
Well, right, because I'm assuming most of the time for people that don't stutter, when you have trouble getting your words out, it's because you're not sure what to say.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
is
But with
so
people
true.
that stutter, it's the opposite. You know exactly what you want to say, it just won't come out
Yeah.
Now
as you want it to.
you're in some good company though, right? Because there's some pretty famous people that have stuttering problems that they've worked through it and put themselves out there. Who are you in the? You must know who they are.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
Yeah, who are they?
Historically, you could go
Yeah.
like a Winston Churchill
Yeah.
or like Marilyn Monroe or
Yeah.
somebody like
Wow.
that.
I didn't know that.
I just had one of my middle school students do the biographies at Kellogg, and she did Marilyn Monroe.
Yeah. And I Googled it quick yesterday, and that singer Ed
Sheeran?
Yeah, Ed Sheeran. Yes, thank you. I forgot
Not that
who it
I
was.
knew that was the thing.
Yeah, he has some stutter problem apparently, because I just googled in famous people.
And it's interesting how it like comes out though, because like as a singer, like that you wouldn't necessarily connect those two as something, but
Well, again, when you sing, the words are already there. There's a lot of accompanying noise.
sure.
There's not as much worrying about what the other person is thinking or having to judge that.
Yeah.
Or because like if I'm talking to you, I have to read all your body cues and be able to tell how you feel about it.
Sure.
Okay.
If you're singing, you're just singing, and most people either they know the words or they know that you're singing and that sort of thing. Plus, there's kind of a natural rhythm and flow to it.
Sure.
And your brain processes singing a little bit differently than it does conversation as well. So that's why most people who sing don't stutter. Although I have worked with a few that even when they sing, they do stutter.
What was it like growing up? How did your parents or teachers address that or approach that situation and help you work through it? I mean, I think sometimes people say like, I got no help, or, they overanalyze or whatever. Like, what did that process look like in terms of identifying it and working through it?
Well, the old school way, was don't talk about it. Don't talk about it with your kid, and hopefully it'll
go away.
Okay. So just don't talk about it.
Interesting.
So I never talked about it much with my parents at all. I mean, obviously it was there. And in fact, I never talked with my dad about it hardly at all. Because he was worried about me being upset, and I stuttered more around him, and he thought it was because I made him nervous.
Sure.
But really it was because I respected him so much. But we never talked about it, so we never knew that.
Okay, yeah.
So it wasn't until I was in college and we talked, and we're like, oh, well, we both should have been talking about this.
Yeah.
So we wasted all that time.
Yeah.
So that's something else that I tell my families and parents that I work with. I'm like, we got to make this an open conversation, not something you talk about all the time.
Right.
But if your kid had asthma, you'd occasionally bring up their asthma.
Right.
Yeah.
And if they had a particularly hard day, you'd say, oh gosh, how can I help?
Yeah.
And now a quick word from our sponsors.
KFG Coaching is sponsoring this episode of the podcast.
Is sponsoring the podcast and really people's lives. That's what she does.
Absolutely. She is a mindset coach.
Yes.
Krista is her name. And incredible person.
Totally. Amazing
Yeah,
person.
I've been able to chat with her several times, and I love that she is able to bridge the gap, right? When you go into a business, employees don't really want to talk to HR about certain things because that's within the organization.
Right. Right.
And she bridges that gap really well, like extremely well, between the employees and like in HR departments.
Yes, absolutely.
And just brings out what some of the issues might be or whatever else. It's one of the talents that she has.
Communication wizard.
Yes.
That's totally what it is. And bridging the gap is like putting it lightly, but helping to get people on the same page, feel comfortable talking to her and relaying that information to the other side with intentionality and, really good communication. I think it's a win-win for everyone. And
in a
great
respectful
resource.
way.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's not like you did this wrong or you did that wrong or whatever else. It's actually just finding good solutions.
Right.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, it's a win-win situation.
Yeah.
Your employees are more productive. Your business is more productive when you get some of that out of the way. That's exactly what she does. Makes all that smooth over, gets people back on track.
Exactly.
It's perfect.
And what's great too, because she's like a business coach. She also is a certified trainer. Like this is what she does. And she has a lot of, what I really love about it, she has a lot of personal experience that she brings to the table, right? She's not just one of those people that runs her business from the outside and just says, this is how you do it.
Do as I
she
say.
has exactly. She has that experience, that personal experience to really make that happen and work and bridge those gaps that we talked about. But she also does personal coaching, like people all over the world.
And it's the experience and the trust that you can get with her not
Yeah.
just get, but you feel right
Yeah.
away. And I think
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
the impact and the change that
Yeah.
opens the doors for businesses to be more successful and people to be more successful because they have someone to guide them.
Absolutely.
For sure.
We need to look her up. I
Yes.
want to look her up.
You've got to go internet wherever you are. Hit up kfgcoaching.com. She has got all of the information that you need to get to where you need to go and get connected with her from a business or personal standpoint. Either way, it's a good investment.
Yeah. I'm thinking I might, like, literally, I might contact her.
Right.
Yeah.
Get over there,
It's brilliant.
kfgcoaching.com. That's all you need to do. She'll take care of the rest.
Thank you, KFG Coaching.
Yes, we thank you, appreciate you, and wish you the best of luck with all of our listeners here.
Absolutely. Maple Springs Campground is sponsoring the show.
Yes. Why would you not want to get out and relax while you listen to our podcast?
Absolutely. I mean, they've got
Perfect
free
place.
Wi-Fi.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Right? So kick back. You can go horseback riding.
Absolutely. They've got like a whole area for horse people.
I'm not a horse person, but I'm just intrigued by the fact that they have this.
Yeah, exactly. Like literally, there's a spot you can keep your horses and tie them up and all that kind of stuff for them. So it's great.
That just blows my mind. But I'd probably be the one fishing. That
Trout
would be my
fishing,
thing.
that area is known for it. I mean, and there's
Yeah.
that whole area. What is trout fishing open in May, right?
Right.
So it's coming up.
So like right after ice fishing.
Yeah.
Basically.
True.
We're hoping it's going to be warm enough by then, but I'm already planning my summer vacations. So
Yeah, bring
this
the
is
family
definitely
down
on the
there.
bucket list.
Yeah, I've been down there many times. They have church services on Sundays.
Yes. That's so awesome.
Yeah, so that's from Memorial Day to Labor Day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Small window.
Free
but
showers, free
lots
Wi-Fi.
of things. Yeah.
What more do you need?
You really don't
Listen
need
to the
any
podcast
more.
while you're in the shower.
Yes, I love it. Maple Springs at campground.com. You can go figure out your reservations, get it booked now. That's what I'm going to be doing so I can go enjoy
Did you
some
forget
vacation.
the www?
Oh, we're never going to live this down. But for those of you who need that as well, it is www.maplespringscampground.com, just in case there's any questions.
Had to throw it out there. Hey, thanks, Maple Springs Campground.
We thank you.
And now, back to the episode.
You have to talk about it and recognize it. So, again, back to your question about growing up, there was that silence. You know, there was always speech therapy. I started speech therapy
Sure.
when I was 6. But really, and not as much now, but especially then, it was speech therapy didn't really know quite what to do. And the
Sure.
schools are always kind of strapped for resources. So I do remember a lot of like fun games. Like I really thought that one lady's job was to play Pop-O-Matic Trouble like with me because that's
Yeah.
all we did. You know?
How does that, like when you were 6 years old versus what you're doing today, what does that look like in the difference, right? Like how different is it today than it was for you growing up in helping?
As far as speech therapy?
Yep, as far as
The
helping.
activities and stuff that
Yeah,
you do.
as far as helping kids.
Well, I think a lot of it revolves around mindset. And a lot of it revolves, I know for my brand of therapy or what I like to do is try to show the person that people don't talk not to stutter. People talk to communicate information.
That
Yeah.
is such a great point.
That is.
So the number one thing is, did you get what you wanted? Because usually, I mean, if you boil communication down to its base level, we're all trying to get something.
Yeah.
Whether it's encouragement or love or support or a cheeseburger.
Right.
We're trying to get something.
Yeah.
Did you get your cheeseburger?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, then it's mission accomplished.
Or like
Yeah.
what we're trying to do is get to know you, right?
Yeah.
That's why we're speaking is to get to know you. That's why the words are coming out. That's
Right,
very interesting. I never thought of it that way.
I love that mentality about it because I think you had mentioned something in the information that you sent over to Matt about that perception of the communication as, you know, the communication is the tool and there is a, you know, minor speed bump in that process, but it's, you know, the more emphasis that you put on the speed bump, you know, the bigger of an issue it becomes. And I think when you flip that for especially a kid, I think, to using the communication tool, that it changes things.
For a lot of people, not all, but for a lot of stuttering is trying not to stutter.
It makes
okay.
so much
Yeah.
sense.
You're
because-
stopping and then not saying anything.
Right.
It used to be the worst thing in the world for me to say my name. And for a lot of people that stutter, that's a big deal
Sure.
because
Yeah.
you can't change it. You
Yeah.
can't alter it.
Yeah.
And, growing up, people, I'd say, they'd ask me my name and I'd go, Jeff. And they'd go, are you sure? Because that's what it seems. But people that stutter, and that's something else, they try to make it socially acceptable. And if you act like you don't know, that's more socially acceptable. Or if you pause and act like
Sure.
you're thinking, that's more socially acceptable than
Yeah.
Jeff.
Okay.
If you had a moment
Interesting.
of stuttering there. So
Those associations, I think, make a huge difference in, I think, how you look at it because, especially kids in general are trying to figure the world out. And for you, saying that, you're saying, this is what I've found socially acceptable and my pitch, to working around what, is a perceived roadblock or what have you. And I think that we get stuck on those associations sometimes is, well, this is how I'm doing it now because this is my approach rather than focusing on the fact that we're still just trying to communicate and that's the tool that we're using.
Well, and a lot of people that stutter, in fact, I'd say the vast majority get really good at hiding the stuttering
Okay.
or masking the fact that they stutter at all.
Because they don't accept it themselves, or they're trying to just be accepted.
They're trying to navigate the world, and my attitude has changed on that over the years. I mean, it used to be, no, we can't ever hide our. What am I trying to say? It's you can't avoid the stuttering because then that leads to more avoidance. But now I'm kind of thinking it's all kind of avoidance, really.
what it
It's
is.
Right. So I've kind of changed my perceptions of that. But
Sure.
yeah, because a lot of people who stutter do try to hide it. And
Yeah.
when I'm talking with my clients, we have frank conversations about, well, you really can't trick a tricker. Like you can't, because I've been there, because
Sure.
I've tried to hide my stuttering for years.
Yeah.
And, it
Did
didn't
you
work out
find
very
that you
well.
communicated less just to avoid, having, that stutter in a conversation that you just chose not to have conversations as much?
Yes, and that's why now, as an adult, you can't shut me up because I'm making up because I'm making up for lost time.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you had said, the try not to stutter thing, I had a friend who, when she first started dating her husband, stuttered, and it was more prevalent in the beginning, and whether or not that's because we notice it more or what have you. But, he's trying to make a good impression, like all those normal nervous things in general, he's trying to avoid, but then also that, hiding of that, roadblock for him. And as time went on, as he got more comfortable and focused less on not stuttering, then it became not an issue as
Well,
much.
and that is the anxiety piece.
Yeah.
It's
an activator for sure.
It's not the neurologic piece. You
Yeah.
can't change that or alter that too much, especially as an adult. But with the anxious piece, yeah. I mean, if you're thinking in your mind, I can't stutter. Well, for one, I like to tell my clients, it's like if you're standing at the free throw line at a basketball game and you go, I can't miss.
Yeah.
You're probably more likely to miss.
Yeah, right.
Whereas if you have a routine and you've been there and you follow that routine, you're more likely for success.
Right.
And
that's a cool piece to marry that up, the whole I can't thing, because, it's like as soon as you say you can't, all of a sudden your focus is on that.
Right.
Whether it's not stuttering or
For sure.
not missing the shot, now you've built a negative context around that, and then you're focusing your energy on the negative context of that. And I think for anything, that just becomes bigger. So it makes perfect sense that, whatever you're trying not to do is now a bigger issue, right?
Oh, for sure. And that's something that helps clients a lot is you demystify this and you make it like other aspects of life.
Yeah.
It's
I love
not
that.
some terrible unknown monster, whereas 20, 30 years ago when no one would talk about it with you, you
Yeah.
got to feel like it was some terrible unknown monster. And that's one good thing about the social media, and that is, there is a lot of websites for people to reach out to each other and talk, but I still think that face-to-face
Yeah.
meeting is important.
Yeah, when I decided to do the podcast stuff, I said it's as much as I can face to face. Like I mean, I've gone to different states and like Phoenix and all kinds of stuff. It's so important to do that. I think you need to. It's a good balance, right? You need. I mean, we're obviously putting it on YouTube and different other media, but to do the face to face thing as often as humanly possible, I think, is really what's important, right? And that's you can't. What you would have wanted to do with social media when you were a kid, you probably wouldn't have wanted to go to speech therapy. You would have wanted to just text your friends, right? And things like that instead of actually doing face to face. But I want to circle around to, you said you didn't talk about it 20, 30 years ago. Is there a place that you talk about it too much? Like, in other words, do you shine too bright of a light on it?
You know, I think that too, and I've been to conventions because, believe it or not, there's conventions for people that
There's
stutter.
a convention
and
for
things
everything.
There is. And, you know, sometimes I feel like maybe we make it too much of yourself and too much of who you are, you know, and I think you can advocate, almost over-advocate for yourself.
Okay.
You know?
That's interesting. So it's kind of like a balance, right? I mean, you need to acknowledge that it's there, but it doesn't need to be something that is, that's interesting.
Correct.
That
So
makes
just like just like back to the asthma analogy, if a parent was like, well, you can't participate in PE because you might have an asthma attack. In most circumstances, and again, I'm not an asthma expert, but you know, that wouldn't be something that you would do.
Yeah.
Oh, just like with the person that stutters, you know, that's why I encourage. No, they should raise their hands in class as much as other kids.
Yeah.
They should feel that.
Right.
Yeah.
And their audience should experience that.
Agreed. And I think, you know, to your point of either like putting too much emphasis on it, then, you know, something I see, and I think people try to do this as well, where they're like, they identify with that and like, okay, I'm this, I'm a stutter or whatever. And they, you know, start to change the context of how they live and how they interact with people as, you know, someone that maybe like, for example, is visually impaired, you know, like they start to change how those interactions are. Whereas I think before, when you talked about it less, there was some more figuring out that you had to do yourself. And do you see the kids that you work with these days versus maybe like how you looked at it, doing those types of things where they're like, well, I don't have to do that anymore, or I'm just going to alter, you know, how I do, rather than figuring out how to push through it?
Well, for stuttering, it used to be the big hang up was talking on the phone.
Okay.
Because you'd call
that corded thing.
Right.
Corded thing.
And if nothing came out, people would hang up on you.
Yes.
Or if you called and went, they would think they have a bad connection and, you know, hang up or something like that.
Okay.
Plus you had to explain everything on the phone.
Sure. That can work for your benefit though, right? I mean, I bad connection, right?
Right.
And you don't want to talk to somebody. Sure. That's what people do now.
That's a really interesting point.
Something I did in my book. Actually.
Is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah.
But where was I?
Talking about, you know, like how they change and alter
sure. So
their everyday things. Yeah.
Right. So I can remember, for me, it was, I'm not going to call. I'll drive 25 minutes because then I can point.
Sure.
Or then I've got those context clues. If I want to get my cable package changed, there's no way I'm going on the phone.
Okay.
That's going to be a nightmare.
That makes sense. Okay.
So I'll drive to the cable place 25 minutes so they can show me the packages and I can point to the one I want and don't have the moment of stuttering.
Okay. But that's not healthy either, right?
Oh, no. To drive for no reason.
Yeah.
No.
And so much more expensive.
So well, yeah, but
And
I love the
time-consuming.
face-to-face thing. I mean, I would rather do that just because I like face-to-face. But so it's what you're kind of getting at is really working through how to process that and how to help other people understand this is what I do. Just bear with me a minute, right?
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah.
Just like now, I've noticed this shift and especially, the feedback from some of my young adult clients is I don't have to call to order a pizza. I can do it online.
Yeah.
I don't have to. The other big fear, with people that stutter was always going through the drive-through. Because there's that talk box that comes on. There's 6 people behind you in
Pressure.
line.
Yes.
You can never hear what's going on right. And you got to enunciate clearly and get your words out with what you want,
so much sense.
So that, literally, I've worked with a few clients that was their therapy goal. I want to be able to go through a drive-through.
Nice.
That
makes
Is
sense.
that like part of your like practical, application? Is that like your test at the end of your class is to go through a drive-through?
Well, I can remember I worked with a client in his late 60s.
Okay.
That had never been through a drive-through.
Wow.
He said, I want to be able to have conversations with my wife and her friends at breakfast after church, and I want to be able to go through a drive-through. But again, that's the practicality of what's the point of conversation? Getting what you want. It's not, you used to stutter 20% and now you stutter 10%. It doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
What matters
Did
is
you
are
not
you
get your
accomplishing
result?
what you want, And he had a lot of disfluencies in his speech.
Okay.
The opposite end of that, worked with a guy that was a radio sideline reporter for an NBA team.
Yeah.
Had never stuttered once, but the fear of it was driving him, was giving him trouble because when they would call back to him, he would worry about it. And just that worry was what we worked through, even though the actual physical stuttering wasn't there at all.
Do you find that is a pretty common theme with, your students and clients, that fear of that situation or whatever is like a bigger thing than the actual stutter?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Which is, part of my job is in the public schools and the other part I do privately. So I get to see a nice mix.
Sure.
And I know one thing, like the middle school I work at, they have their little KTTC or their little comment capsule newscast or whatever.
Oh, okay.
Oh, so the middle schoolers do that?
So I encourage my kids who stutter, especially when they show up in 6th grade, I'm like, by 8th grade, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
And 9 out of 10 of them are like,
Yeah.
no way.
Because they've already decided that they're going to eliminate the situations rather than work through them.
And a lot of times caring adults will kind of push them in that direction.
Yeah.
Well, you can do your speech by yourself. No. Maybe the first time.
Yeah.
But the next time you're going to do it in front of the teacher and a couple people.
Yeah.
And the next time you're going to do it in front of
I love that.
maybe 5 people you pick from your class. And the next time you're going to do it in front of the whole class. Because you're just as good. And if you've got a few bumps in your speech, well, what does that matter as long as you... there's a famous speech pathologist that used to say, stutter with zeal. And,
I love it.
With style is what I think about from Toy Story right away.
Yeah.
But like changing the perception about that thing is magical. How you look at like that stuttering thing, with zeal, rather than a debilitating, thing that you can't work through. I think changing that perception is 9/10 of the whole thing.
And it's funny too because nationally we have moved towards that more open mindset that stutter on purpose is actually one of the techniques that you use just to get it out there on your terms.
That makes
rather than on
sense.
stuttering's terms. And the guy that came up with that, and this is a national thing, but if you look back through the stuttering literature, it was a professor at the U who's from Waseca. So there's your local angle on that.
Yeah, nice.
So.
Tell us about the book too.
Well, the book is The Mystery of the Mistakes in Mulligan's Mouth. Published it a few years ago. Like I said, it sat in a drawer, and I was encouraged by Lauren Meglin to get it out there, and we've gotten it out there. It is a fictional account of a 6th grader who stutters, and he finds an object that allows him to speak without stuttering, and it goes through the different choices he has to make through that.
Wow.
How much of that was like an actual account of things that you've been through?
The people that know me that read it say there's a lot of me in it.
Yeah.
It was interesting, though, my own mom, when she read it, she's like, I had no idea. She's like, I had no idea that you went through stuff like that.
Yeah.
You know, because there's accounts in there where you can kind of tell my feelings on things, and we talked about it. So.
And when you write like that, and like what I do a lot of is public speaking, and when you do that, you have to really know yourself. In my opinion, right? You have to know your monsters. You have to know where to put them, when to put them there, all those different things. And it was amazing to me, kind of going through that, like. I gotta bring this forward because this is, in other words, kind of take the sword out of someone's hand. Like, I was doing that with myself, my own mind, and you start thinking through different things in childhood, and you're like, wow, that shaped me, and you don't even, a lot of times as your person, realize that. So it makes sense that your mom didn't even understand it, because I found in myself that I didn't even know and understand that shaped my vision, right?
Well, the first line of the book is
you get real. You get real when you write something like this, right? With yourself. Did you find that?
Oh, for sure. I mean, like I was going to say, the first line of the book.
I remember that. Yeah.
The first line of the book is, I hate speech teachers. So,
Did you?
I did growing up, yeah. Because
what did you, looking back at it now, what do you feel like you hated? Like,
hate's a strong word. I understand that.
Right. No, but like that was your reality. I mean, there was a very strong connection to that environment, and maybe, like when people say like, I hate this, like what was it about that made you uncomfortable, or that you distinctly remember as hate as a sixth grader? Everything's hate as a sixth grader.
Sure, right. Obviously. It was, and that's something I talk about with my kids I work with. You get pulled out of class when you're in the schools. You have to miss other things, some
So that's the
lady
association.
walks in and you've got to leave with them.
Sure.
It kind of points you out as different, which usually middle schoolers don't really want to be perceived as different.
Yeah.
And things were different
Yeah.
back then. It was a lot of relaxation therapy, because if you just relaxed, you didn't stutter, was the thought on that. So
I think that makes so much sense. And I think, one of the things that I find as a parent of a middle schooler is, I hate this. There's so much more to that. Like, so you just identified, 6 other things that are not something that even maybe a sixth grader is understanding, like, or calling out, and I think that helps us to identify some of those bigger issues with where we're having trouble. It's getting called out. It's making that walk, missing out on the fun thing in class because I don't get to, so now I'm associating my, condition or what have you with this whole negative world, because of this, I can't do that.
Well, and that's why when I do consulting for schools or give talks to other speech pathologists and that kind of thing, I'm like, get them ready for when they're ready.
Yeah.
Don't, because when I work, because I've been associated with different adult groups, like, National Stuttering Association, that sorts of thing, for adult groups. And a lot of us talk about how we, quote, hated speech therapy as a kid, and how it was a negative experience. And how, like, for instance, the speech therapist would sit there and hit a clicker every time you stuttered.
Oh gosh,
it's
that's
like
horrible.
no,
horrible.
and that's what they were saying, but they meant it with good intention, because they're trying to keep data, and they're trying to be scientific and all that kind of stuff. And that's why, like, when
what a horrible experience.
Yeah, that
it was
puts
literally
more shame on you
counter.
almost.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. When I was a kid, it was literally a strike counter, like one that counted like balls and strikes, and the guy would sit there and
Right.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Right.
Shame on you. Shame on you.
Don't do this.
Yeah.
Whereas now it's more go communicate. So I say, I tell some of the speech pathologists, because it's a low incidence disorder. So a lot of speech pathologists aren't really comfortable working with people who stutter.
And now, a quick break for you to think about how much you love the narrator of this podcast. And now, back to the episode.
Really?
But yes, that's one.
Explain that a little
Yeah.
deeper.
Well, if you're a speech pathologist, you can work with kids with autism. You can work with articulation. You can which is how kids pronounce things. You can work with grammar or getting young kids to talk more.
Sure.
You can work with traumatic brain injury, stroke, all of that stuff. Stuttering is one part of that.
Yeah, right. Yep.
So out of, let's say, a private caseload of 30, you might have one person that stutters
Okay.
every other year.
Sure.
Or if you're in a school and you've got a caseload of 60, you might have one or two.
Sure.
It's not most of what you do, which is
Interesting.
why, people that specialize in it, like myself, kind of immerse themselves in it
Yeah.
and try to find a way to help. But when I work with the people that don't have a lot of experience, which isn't really their fault, it's just a
Yeah.
low incidence thing. I mean, I have other parts of speech pathology that I don't really feel comfortable with. I always
Just simply because it's not like something you've studied deep enough? Is that why you're not comfortable with it, or?
and it's so complex.
Okay.
Because for years we sat and thought about, well, get that percentage of stuttering down and you fixed the problem.
Right. Yeah, I see.
They used to stutter. I mean, the state of Minnesota in education, the only criteria is 5%. If you stutter less than 5%, you're cured. And it's like, well, that doesn't make any sense because
I
look
probably stutter 5%. Like, I feel like,
look,
you know what I mean? Like,
That
when
is
I'm,
interesting.
look
and
back
I don't mean that as a disrespect thing, but
No.
I mean, like, I'll go through words and talking with someone and I freeze up, right? Like,
right. There's the
Yeah.
freezing up, but yeah, which gets me into a whole
Yeah.
another topic. But yeah, which is why I'd like to someday change how the Minnesota
That's
state education
interesting.
looks at that.
I mean, you
Yeah.
do need a measurement tool. I mean, the thing that I think, in any way, like there has to be a metric of some sort. Otherwise, you don't know whether or not you're moving forward or backwards.
right.
So I do get that part of it.
And now we do have tools that are more, how much does this affect your daily
Yeah.
life?
I think, the dynamic.
that's exactly-
The dynamic assessment of things is the more proper tool. And I think, you talked about how sort of things change from don't do this to like moving through the actual action of communication. Do you feel like the tools that you're equipping students with now focus on how to, figure things out versus how to avoid the stutter? Or how does that, training change over time?
There's different needs for different clients. Some clients, it's 80% counseling.
Okay.
And sometimes it is, speech tools to reduce that tension or to ease out of the tension rather than
Yeah.
push, because a lot of that traditional stuttering that you would think about, I would guess, would be like those sorts of things where they're pushing the words out.
okay.
Sure.
And if you can teach them that it's okay to stutter and you can still turn out a coherent conversation, even if you're stuttering every other word. I mean, you guys are still perceiving what I'm saying, but I'm stuttering in almost every other word.
Yeah.
We
But
still
if
get
I'm-
It's
the
interesting what you
results.
did there.
But if I'm avoiding stuff, and like how I used to stutter when I was 20 it was 90% avoidance.
Sure.
So like if you guys introduced you, can I demonstrate?
Yeah, absolutely.
So like if you guys would have introduced yourself, go ahead and ask me that question that you asked at the beginning, like where I'm from, or just like something like that. And
Sure.
I'll
Well,
do
like
that.
about your story.
Yeah,
Like just
sure.
tell us about yourself.
Yeah, I'm my name's Glessing and Jeffrey, and I guess you'd call me a speech pathologist, and I work with people that can't get their words out.
Interesting.
So that would be my stuttering. So to 90% of people,
Interesting.
they wouldn't even know you stuttered. They'd be
Sure.
like, you're confused.
Yeah,
Or,
exactly. Like
what's
you're-
wrong with you, right?
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, like you don't know who you are. Are you sure that's your name? Right? Like
Right.
I see. That makes sense.
So we talk about in stuttering therapy, what's the message you want to send? Whereas,
Yeah.
you know, if you say you have asthma, people don't judge you for having asthma
Right.
anymore. Now, maybe 40, 50 years ago they
Sure,
used to,
sure.
but not
Yeah.
now. And that's the great thing about the age we live in. Is
Yeah,
we live in an
absolutely.
age of acceptance.
Yes, absolutely.
And stuttering still
It-
kind of not accepted very much because
Because they
it's
don't know
something,
enough.
right?
Yeah.
Which is why we've got to get the word out there.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Which is what's something we're starting in Rochester through Owl Therapy Services in May, May 18th, I believe. We're starting a group called Paths,
Paths.
because there's
Paths.
different paths to where you want to get to in communication. So that's
Yeah.
parents and advocates for those who stutter.
Okay.
Nice.
So
Love
we're going
that.
to do a parents group and start that. And, you know, parents are people that have relatives that stutter or people that are just interesting in stutter. Just come out and kind of talk like we're doing now, kind of get to
Yeah.
know each other. Because
Yeah.
I know a lot of the parents I work with or a lot of the parents in the schools, they've never talked to another person that stutters.
Sure.
Or they've never talked to another parent of another kid that stutters.
I think then, you know, the cool thing about where we're at, you know, and while social media can make things worse, but you find these groups that, you know, for myself, I'm in one for kids with, you know, anxiety, and a host of other things like that. But what I found is you find other tools. There are people that have experienced things and you're like, okay, great. I can find something else to try because I've tried everything else. I think, you know, having that camaraderie in a common thing like that is huge. And I think too, the more people like understand it, even the perception changes. For example, with anxiety, it's another thing that you don't see at face value. And while the kid is always, you know, agitated or, you know, flipping out about things or what have you, like those are all symptomatic of what is actually going on. And I think seem to be said about, you know, the stuttering is that it's not obvious. You are perceiving it as he's, you know, not communicating well, or I don't understand him, or he doesn't know, he's questioning, whatever. But I think the more that we see that connection, the more that we can understand and help other people move through those things. You know?
For sure. Oh, for sure. And the more you understand things, the more you experience, the better off, the better equipped you are
Yeah.
to help solve the problem.
Right.
Right.
You know?
I like what you said about acceptance too. I think that's so important. Like in the difference between acceptance and tolerance though, right? Like you have to accept what it is, but you don't have to tolerate that you stay in that place.
Yeah.
Right.
For sure.
You know, things like that. So I really like that you said about acceptance because that's so important, but to know the difference.
Yeah.
Right. Like
Right.
between
Right.
tolerance and acceptance, it's a world apart. But tell me about who illustrated this. That was an interesting story when you walked in, and then I have another question for you too.
Sure. The book was illustrated by Emmy Kidman. She graduated from
Yeah,
Schaefer a few years ago, and she
Beautiful.
was a student.
I'm showing this if you're listening.
Right.
You'll have to go check the video because it's a beautiful illustration. But I love how
is.
you pull in that story.
She was a student of mine, and I had a story, and she had the talent when it came to writing, or to drawing. So we got together, and she illustrated the pictures for me.
That's super cool.
I love that, you know, you talk about kind of that process. Do you feel like what she visually communicated was what is being communicated in the story?
Yes.
I think like how we address that is really interesting because you're telling the story to, you know, communicate a certain point. She's visually communicating. I think, you know, that's one of the cool things that I keep hearing you say is talking about the communication process itself, the message that's being delivered versus the method or road bump, you know, speed bumps when you know, are trying to communicate things. And I think we all are trying to communicate things, and we all do it differently. And I think the acceptance piece is understanding that people do communicate differently.
Well, because
Yes. And some patience with that communication differently too, right?
Yeah.
Well, and just knowledge and education. I mean, one goal with the book and something I've been working on, not quite published yet, but working on it, is a guide not only for parents to sit down and read this with their kids, and then there's questions every chapter about, well, how do you feel about that, to get them talking about it.
Yeah.
So that was one reason that I wrote it.
like that.
Another reason, even as a tool for classrooms, just read it as a classroom reader, and then there's questions every chapter that will be in another publication to help educate them about what stuttering is and what stuttering isn't. Because as they transition from that elementary to middle school, it's usually where some of the other kids start with the bullying and the teasing and that kind of stuff. And being able to process through that with kids from both sides. Because for the kids that stutter, it's, well, he asked me, why do I talk like that? And it's, well, that's because it's different. It's not because he's necessarily
Attacking you.
attacking you
Yeah.
and making
Yeah,
fun
it's
of
a
you.
perceived.
He's curious.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Perception is reality.
Right. Well, like,
Well, it's not, but we make it that way.
Yeah, I mean,
That's-
but that I think plays a huge role in, you had mentioned before, the tools are a very small part of what you do.
So small.
And, the other part is sort of the mind conditioning, so to speak.
mindset. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Like back to the bullying thing. I mean, if I wear a cat in a hat to school, people are going to ask me why I got that hat on. They're
Right.
not necessarily making fun of me.
Yes. That's
cool.
absolutely. Yeah. That's
Because
the
it's
perception.
different and it's
yeah.
novel.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
if you equip your young students, 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds, 10-year-olds, to go, oh yeah, sometimes I stutter, rather than, and they hang their head.
Exactly.
It's a huge difference. If it just becomes a thing, and like to your point, not their entire lives,
Yep.
Right.
and not too much of a thing, but not a nothing either. A something, but not a driving force.
Yeah.
I think you need to understand your feelings and associations around those things. I think that makes a big difference too.
And I think too, what you said, knowledge and education, that's huge for me. And what I do is like, that's the only way to do anything, right? Is knowledge and education. You can make all the rules and laws and whatever else, but if we don't understand the knowledge and educate behind it, then it doesn't matter. Those laws and rules don't matter. Which is then where I'm going is you are now equipping people to not be victims. Right,
For sure,
and
absolutely.
that's what you're doing is you're equipping the people who stutter, the kids, to not be a victim because they're not.
Right.
But if they perceive that they are, they become that.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, totally agree.
And two, I can think of a story. The person I owe becoming a speech pathologist to is a person who told me I couldn't do it.
Yes.
And at the time, I was that I couldn't do another job.
Oh, okay.
Let me go back and explain if we've got the time.
Sure.
I was working at a golf course. I was living in Florida.
Sounds fabulous.
Did you grow up in Minnesota?
Yes.
Yeah, I thought that's what you said before,
Yeah.
email or something. But so that's a whole nother. I want to ask, why did you come back? Right? I mean,
I was
but no,
looking
go ahead.
for a
Sorry,
great
Living
place
in
to raise
Florida.
kids,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
there
good.
you
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
And I'm working at a golf course, and I'm getting ready. I was just graduated high school. I was going to community college or whatever, and there was a college in Florida where they train you to be a golf course superintendent.
Nice.
And being an old farm kid and being a golfer, and I was like, wow, it's kind of the merger of the two,
Right.
Yeah.
And it's not like the greenskeeper on Caddyshack. It's much more complicated than that.
I was gonna say something when you wrapped up your story, so I'm glad you threw that in there. I love it.
It actually pays a lot better than a speech pathologist, but hey,
Yeah.
So I was going to go to college and do that. So I talked to my boss at the golf course I worked at about that. And he was, kind of a good old boy guy because, there's different ranges. There's some people are the superintendent at Augusta National, and some people are the superintendent at Sebring Municipal Golf Course.
Yeah,
And there's
that
a different
1%.
range of people there. And, he sat back and he goes, you can't do that. I'm like, well, why not? He's like, well, because you stutter. And you've got to talk to members, and you've got to talk with vendors, and you've got to run a crew, and you've got to hire, and you've got to...
So it's not all glamorous.
You can't do that. There's no way. And I was pretty devastated.
Yeah.
And I called my high school speech pathologist. It's because they're not all bad. I didn't hate them. And I didn't hate them all.
A lot less than high school.
I was
feel like.
frustrated by the fact that I wasn't getting the help I needed.
Sure.
Yeah.
So it was way out of frustration.
We're talking about knowledge and education again at that
Right.
point. Yeah.
So, and he said, well, maybe you should work on this stuttering thing. And so I went to the University of Central Florida instead. Didn't become a golf course superintendent. Didn't learn how to kill bugs. And
Yeah,
cut
speaking
grass.
of bugs, we
Yeah.
talk
Right,
about mine all the
right,
time,
yeah.
but we're living
But,
in the country.
Thank goodness for my old boss, Jim, or that book wouldn't exist.
Wow.
And all the people that I've talked to and the people I've had in class, they wouldn't get that help either, or that spark,
Yeah.
because he did something at the time was, quote, kind of mean,
Yeah.
but that pushed a whole different level
Right.
Sure.
Exactly. That's
of good things that can come out of somebody being mean. So that's kind of hard to wrap your head around
Yeah.
sometimes, but
Well, I think he challenged, that comfort zone where you were
Yes.
comfortable staying the course that you were on,
Mm-hmm.
right? The uncomfortable thing was to change that course, not golf course, but
no
that
pun
life
intended.
course, to get out of that mindset that you were in. I mean, that was a pretty, courageous thing to completely change direction. Talk about that choice that you made. I mean, was that an obvious choice? Was that an easy choice? What did that look like?
Well, I've always liked to do several different things, and speech pathology kind of has that, where
Sure.
there's a bunch of different things you can work with and that kind of stuff. And at the time when I set out, it was to, right the wrongs of school speech therapy and fix
Hate them less.
stuttering and all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And, you find out once you become a speech pathologist and you become an adult, and it's not as easy as it seems.
Yeah.
Nothing is.
Break time. Break time. Break time. Yep, time for a break. We'll be right back. And now, back to the episode.
Totally. The other question I had for you was in your email that you sent, was it the second line even maybe? You said, I stutter, right? And that, at first I was like, are you saying that because I should be aware of it and not have you on the show? Or, I'm a lot of things are just blowing up in my mind. But I think I realized later, and tell me if I'm wrong, but it's just something that you let people know just simply because they should know, and that's okay to know. What's the reasoning behind that?
Some of it is because, again,
And I'll tell you why I asked the question. Sorry,
be a
go
part
ahead.
of you, but not the driving force of you.
Yes.
Another thing too, I don't know your background.
Yes.
I wanted to ease your anxiety because I know I have started talks with a purposeful stutter, like a really long, minute-long stutter, so that I can get the audience perception of, oh gosh, we've got to sit through an hour and a half of this, and then I'll stop and go, that was kind of uncomfortable, wasn't it? What did
Sure.
you feel? And then
Yeah.
I'll get the feedback from the audience, because I don't think anybody's going, oh, that sounds wonderful. It's challenging to stutter that much. So I did it more to ease your fear.
Interesting.
Okay, sure.
And also to, okay, I stutter.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That makes
And
sense.
the reason I ask you that is that something that I had to doing what I do, especially with the schools, and my daughter died in a car crash. And so, I had to get to a place of, obviously I accepted it and all that stuff way before I kind of agreed to take this course, but this life course, not golf course. But that is that, okay, I kind of let them know too right away, like right up front, like I do this because of this, but that doesn't mean that I'm coming in there to be sad and to cry and to make you sad or anything else. It's knowledge and education, right?
Yeah.
And things like that. So to me, that's what it was. It was like, okay, wait, he just accepts this, and so people should know.
Sure.
Because that's kind of what I do, right? I'm like, my daughter died, right? And so let's just get the elephant in the room out and talk about it.
I think it sets the stage. You talk about the knowledge and education thing, and you really need to create a certain space of understanding, from like where we're starting at. And I think the context of what you speak about makes a lot more sense in, both sides. That
I'm telling you, Zach's going to be famous.
So
he's going to hang out.
Yeah, speaking of communication disruptions here.
I don't even think the mics are picking that up, just so you're aware. But
So if anyone's hearing me pause or seeing my eyeballs with that mom look, that is a result of somebody whistling in the background. But I do think it sets a context and understanding so people can really get into that place to get to the next level.
Yes.
In both instances of what you guys talk about, I think it makes a huge difference as part of that story, not the whole story. We're going to move on and get to, the main premise of your talk or whatever you're doing. But I think it sets a stage for people and helps them understand and then get a different perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, just like when I'm working with adults, and one of the big sticking points for adults who stutter is a job interview.
Sure.
Like, tell them you stutter right out of the bat. And they're like, mm-mm.
Yeah.
I'm like, well, look at when I introduced myself stuttering how I used to 20 years ago,
Yeah.
opposed to what I put in the email.
Right.
Sure.
Oh, okay, that's why he's doing that.
Yeah.
As
Yeah.
opposed to maybe he's not confident, maybe he's lying, maybe
Sure.
he's scared, maybe he doesn't know what he's talking about.
And
Yeah.
so, circling back to that job interview, you wouldn't hire him then, basically.
Correct.
But I would,
Your perception's totally
yeah,
different.
I would hire somebody if they came in and said, "Hey, I stutter." I'd probably just say, "You got the job," right? Like, I would feel that. Like that would make me feel like they're being honest, that they accept who they are, and those are two very powerful things
I agree.
in someone that works for you or with
Correct.
you.
Yeah.
It's powerful.
And for most jobs, the stuttering isn't going to get in the way. Now, I
Correct.
did once work with a guy who wanted to be a radio man on a nuclear submarine. Yeah, we might need to get this speech stuff squared away and have less just fluencies.
Yeah.
Yeah. But for your regular run-of-the-mill job, or even a salesperson or something like that, it can almost be a positive thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Especially if you go back to stuttering with zeal
Yeah.
Yeah.
and stuttering with
I
that
love that.
confidence.
Yeah.
I think that's your like headliner. I mean, I think it totally changes the perception. I think, in going back to my, friend's husband, like part of it was a little uncomfortableness on our side saying, okay, how does he feel about it? How do we, adapt to it? Like, do you wait? Do you, interrupt? Do you how do you acknowledge it? And I think, getting other people comfortable with it right off the bat, put it out there. I think that changes a lot of things and eases other people's, fear with how do I respond or,
That says, it says a lot of things when you do that. It says that we can talk about it, right? Like if you tell me you stutter, I know now we can talk about it, right?
Yeah.
Rather than when it happens, do I bring it up? Do I not bring it up?
Right,
Now I'm
yeah.
uncomfortable, and
Well, and most
so it
people,
makes total sense.
anecdotally, just like yourself, will go, "Oh, my husband or my
Yeah.
friend's husband stutters, or
Yeah.
my uncle stutters, or gosh, I had a grandfather that stuttered. What causes that?" And that causes a whole nother area of conversation to be opened up.
Totally.
And it also makes you more human.
Yeah.
And it makes you a confident human.
Yes.
Which
Yeah.
is a good
Exactly.
thing. Because
It
even
is
if
what
you
it is.
stutter,
Yeah.
you don't have to be a non-confident human.
Right.
Yeah.
You're
Absolutely.
you're choosing and adapting your life to do that.
Yeah, that's really good. Tell us how we can get a hold of your book.
The book's on Amazon.
Okay.
So that would probably
I've never
be,
heard of Amazon. What is that?
Yeah, something they started out.
The place that doesn't have.
They started with books.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's
Amazon
the
started
funny
with
thing
books.
about that. Yeah. Now
absolutely.
it's everything.
Yeah,
Toilet paper.
Amazon started with books. It was
Well,
was really interesting.
maybe not.
I can't exactly remember, but obviously his name's Jeff too, right? Who owns Amazon. So, like, hey, you never
Right,
know.
you're right up there.
Maybe you're the next.
Jeff
and then,
Bezos.
go to www.midwestfluencyservices.com.
Midwest
which
Fluency Services.
I'm actually going to merge that in with Owl Therapy Services.
Okay.
That's who we're working with, starting the Paths group. Paths. That's kind of hard to say.
Yeah.
PATHS.
Yeah. So parents and advocates for those who stutter.
Yes.
So,
Nice.
and we're going to start that group in May
That's
18th.
awesome.
I'd like to invite anybody else that would be interested to attend.
Great.
Perfect.
Love
it.
that. Perfect.
Anything else that you wanted to say, Beth? Questions before we wrap up?
Gosh, it's just such a neat message that has so much power over so many aspects of our lives, that courage over comfort thing.
Thank you.
I would actually like to thank you for having me and giving me the opportunity to share a little bit of myself and hopefully get some words out to those who stutter, that it's not about not stuttering. It's about communicating.
Yeah.
I think we can
Share,
all
we
learn
share.
from that. For sure.
Yeah, I love that. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the compliment and the praise. I appreciate that. Checks in the mail.
Sure, that's right.
No, the message I think is huge, and I love that we can help people focus on, we've got words to say, we've got stories to say, and whatever speed bump, whether that's you stutter or you're having some fears around these other things, like, we have messages to get out, and when we are uncomfortable, that is a pretty powerful place to share those stories, because somebody else is in that same boat.
For sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we appreciate you sharing your story, and hopefully, can be a huge message for other people that, you can get beyond what somebody tells you can't do.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeffrey.
Good.
All right.
Thank you.
Yep. Take care.
Woo! I learned a lot.
I learned so much. And I think at the end of the day, we can all see that one piece of our story is just that. It is just a piece of who we are. It doesn't have to be our entire identity.
Exactly. That's absolutely right. And I'm really interested to learn more about Jeffrey. Like he mentioned in the podcast, that there's a lot of him in this book. It's not like it's not a biography or autobiography, but it's like he places himself throughout the book, and I think somewhat unintentionally, even as he created the character.
We can all identify with stories and situations. Like, that's how we, connect to things. And I think his goal of, communicating that in this story, fictional or not, you get to connect with that and see what that outcome is, and put yourself in that perspective.
Absolutely. And I think, well, you were here, but the conversation that we had before the podcast started and the conversation after, it's just so interesting to learn about people. They're so deep. So I encourage people to go get the book and learn more about Jeffrey. And in turn, probably you're going to learn something about yourself.
Guaranteed.
Absolutely.
Guaranteed.
Hey, don't forget to click share. Don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to do all those other fun things that helps share the communication.
Absolutely. We're going to challenge you continuously, as we challenge ourselves, and the stories that you hear will continue to do that. So make sure to subscribe so you get those notices when they come out.
And right now, maybe I'll just throw this out there. If you're still listening at the very end of this podcast, Matt Logan Speaks is going to increase, while right now everybody is decreasing in our current situation. And I have been working very hard the last couple of days to increase and not decrease. So stay tuned.
Awesome.
See you next time.